Hello. Do you ever think as much as you should about things here in Ireland? This is your country, our country. We have to live in it.
Eight out of 10 Irish people believe protecting the environment is now an urgent problem. The poll shows that their biggest concerns were the disposal of industrial waste, and 92% of those interviewed believe there's a greater awareness of the environment now than 5 years ago. Yet 75% still believe that job creation is more important than environmental protection. Just 8% gave the government credit for raising awareness, and 81% believe the government isn't doing enough.
We would have a diesel spill at least once a year. At least once a year there is a great film of oil on the river. You know, the pollution event might only last a couple of hours or a day or so, but the effect is to kill the birds, kill their food supply. I suspect garages find it's cheaper, even if they were to be fined, just to dump it in a river.
Someone will swim into the diesel oil. The diesel oil will cover his plumage. Now, of course, what that will do is break down the waterproofing properties of that plumage. The water will get through the plumage, right through to the bird's skin. So he starts to lose heat very quickly. He gets cold. He gets cold very fast. So he starts to suffer from hypothermia and from shock, the shock of hitting that dreadful cold water. Now, if he doesn't get out of the water fast, he's going to die, and he knows that. He gets out of the water, and he starts to preen that oil often. And of course, in preening it, he swallows it. And this, of course, begins to inflame his esophagus and his digestive tract generally. And if he swallows enough oil, it will kill him.
It used to quite regularly get a dose of runoff agricultural fertilizers, you know, and that's just deoxygenate the water with it causes algae to thrive, and they use up the oxygen, and that's fish float to the surface dead. But there's also been poison from some of the industrial estates. There was either through carelessness or by accident, or possibly deliberate attempt to slip something away that might be more expensive to dispose of properly.
We've also had major pollution events involving commercial or industrial detergents, and that again has stripped out the river.
Devastated. When we consider the amount of work that's gone into the river, not over a period of a year or 2 years, but over a long, long time, 20, 30, 40 years.
The extent of this kill on the Tolka these days is unusual, but the Tolka is resilient, as generally natural systems are, and the Tolka will bounce back, but it's going to take a number of years.
This is the sixth fish kill in the Dublin area this year, and the most serious so far. The Tolka has long been a river vulnerable to pollution from agricultural and industrial effluent.
The culprit, slurry effluent from farms and industrial waste escaping into nearby waters.
But I think the biggest problem with any prosecution brought against these people is invariably very expensive, and costs are rarely awarded towards a government agency. So unless a government agency like the EPA feels it's economically worthwhile, they have a very difficult choice in front of them.
The area worst affected is a stretch between Clonee in County Meath and Blanchardstown, 3 miles downstream. Fisheries inspectors say they think they have identified the source of the pollution, and they are taking legal proceedings.
The sad thing is a lot of environmental legislation in Europe often talks about the polluter pays as an underlying philosophy, but it never seems to make it onto the statute books.
If it's an interest of overriding public interest or something like that, the government can decide to, ignore the environmental law and go ahead with it. But I would think today it would take a brave government to do it.
An environmental crime is not seen as a crime. And the EU, what we've discovered is the EU trade and business is still absolute king. Now, having said that, it's nothing new. I think in the 18th century, with a paper mill here, it would have been absolutely foul downriver.
See, the thing about a river is a river is self-cleaning. The damage is done, the fish are wiped out, and the river starts to clean itself. Thankfully, you get floods. The rivers flood, and it's not like a lake where it doesn't get washed away.
More than 100 houses in Botanic Avenue in Drumcondra were evacuated after the River Tolka burst its banks.
Nothing will ever replace all the things that you built up over the years. And while we all now have lovely new houses and lovely new carpets and lovely new suites and everything else, it's not the same.
See, the Tolka has a very, very steep gradient. And one day we have a flood, 2 days later it's gone. While other slower flowing rivers like the Boyne and the likes of that, they build up and they're slower to run off. But they're slower to build up and slower to run off. The Tolka gets like a flash flood. That's where it gets its name from. And Tolka, the flood.
The developing Ireland is contributing in many ways to the problem. Experts say every cobble-locked driveway, every new building is taking away grass that could soak up rain rather than see it roll down the road.
What's happened is the river has moved. It wasn't always there. It would have been in various places.
You always get floods, no matter, this is a floodplain, the whole area is a floodplain. That's why some of the places that you hear about getting flooded up the country, they find out afterwards, oh, they built them on the floodplain.
Climate change is going to affect weather patterns in this country. And as a consequence, we have to plan accordingly.
Now, why there is a statue of Socrates here is one of our enduring mysteries. He had to kill himself by drinking hemlock when he was judged to have corrupted the youth of Athens. It's related to the carrot family, so actually it's related to the giant hogweed. There's a lot of toxins there, hemlocks, water hemlock, dropwort, giant hogweed, they're all got incredible toxins. If you fertilise it well, it'll get up to 5 metres in height with a flower head going on towards half to a metre across, so it's a spectacular plant. So what usually happens, there were 3 children who just built a little den out of it. So they had 3rd degree burns.
It's highly poisonous to your skin. If the sap of it gets on your skin, it gives you a lifetime burn. I suppose it's an invasive plant.
It is invasive. I think it was taken into one of probably the major gardens in the area as a decorative plant and then just spread it on the Tolka.
And it would be a plant that, for years people would have thought it innocuous. And even in 1904, in a flora of County Dublin, the author said, giant hogweed looks like it's got the potential to spread a lot further. But nothing was done. It would have cost practically nothing, and now it's too late.
In the last years, people are aware, farmers in particular, not that they were ever malicious about it, but they're aware of the potential damage that runoff can do. And the environmental people, whoever they are also monitoring any effluent that might run from the industrial estates. So there's that kind of concern is much more manifest, and consequently the river less susceptible to damage.
Down here in the summertime, it's like a holiday camp. Seriously, there's so many people down here with the kids into the water. You know, that is, to me, is beautiful. Compared to what it used to be like, you know, it's actually beautiful. And in the winter time here, that place is just full of, the seabirds all come in here and everything. All the gulls come in for some kind of fresh water, just to relax in here and you feel safe in here.
Fishing, mental health go hand in hand. The stresses of life for a young person growing up in any urban environment, to be able to come down and do this, what I'm doing now, here, it's unbelievable, you know.
This is a juvenile salmon. It was among several found in the River Tolka at Glasnevin. The first time in over a century. But fishery authorities warned this could all be wiped out by one pollution event.
But the heron would be associated with the water. It'll eat anything that moves. It would eat rats, it'll eat other birds, eat ducklings particularly. Sometimes even stuff they'll attempt keep on trying to swallow stuff they know they're never going to get.